Hey there, I'm the Communication Doc, and this is the third in my series of videos about how to be ready for romance and avoid a broken heart in the process. So if you haven't watched my first two videos, you definitely need to check those out. And also, if you haven't followed me, then make sure you do that on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at the Communication Doc. So my third piece of advice on this topic is to figure out what you want in a relationship and a relationship partner. Now, that may seem like that's common sense, but the reality is, especially a lot of young people really have no idea what they want in a relationship. They find somebody they find attractive, they fall in love, they end up maybe getting married after that, and they never really stop and think about, but what do I actually like in another person beyond just the physical? Now, of course, physical attraction is important. In fact, that's the very first component of attraction, because when we first meet people, that's all we have. And physical attraction is important. So you should think about, what do you find physically attractive? Now, for me, my dad is tall and I'm a fairly tall woman, and so for me, tall was a really important physical characteristic. It may not be for you, but it was for me. And so our backgrounds, our experiences, those are all going to lead into our preferences that we have for both physical and other aspects that we look at. But I really strongly suggest that as you encounter people and as you encounter things that you realize you find attractive, you should write them down. So you might have a list of physical characteristics, as I mentioned. You might also, and you should, have a list of personality character traits. So, and be as specific as you can. I do this exercise with my students, and a lot of times I'll say, okay, so what do you find attractive personality-wise? And invariably they'll say, oh, a sense of humor. And I say, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, we all like to have people make us laugh, but that's actually a very unique thing. So, for example, my husband makes me laugh a lot, and for me, I find things that are kind of random funny. That's my unique sense of humor. So I want someone who has a sense of humor that can connect to me. Other personality traits are also important, and while we're on the subject of that, there's two basic ideas as to what really makes a relationship work. One of them is birds of a feather flock together, which is the idea you're going to get along better with people who are more similar to you. And the other is opposites attract. That is, you're going to get along well with people who are opposite of you. So which one is actually true? Well, research shows that for couples that have been married and have had satisfying relationships, that really the birds of a feather is more true, at least when it comes to certain aspects such as values, beliefs, even culture to a certain extent. And you could see how that would be the case. So let's say, for example, you end up getting together with someone who has a very different philosophy of how to handle finances. That's going to create a lot of problems, right? So you may not have the exact same philosophy, but you want to be at least somewhat similar in important beliefs and values. And not that you can't accommodate to somebody who's from a completely different cultural background, because you definitely can, but it does take a lot of additional work. But the opposites attract is also true, especially when we talk about personality or character traits. So you may find that what you find attractive are people who are different from you in personality or character. I tend to be a pretty routine person. You could almost set a clock by me, and as a result, that tends to make me a pretty boring person. I don't have a lot of spontaneity. Well, my husband does, and so his spontaneity helps to balance out my routines, and my routines help make it that we can actually have a somewhat stable life with his spontaneity. So those are all things that you want to pay attention to. There might be other characteristics, like for me, I really think you can tell a lot about a person if they're able to interact with people of varying ages. So if they're good interacting with kids and they're good interacting with old people, I think that's a pretty good sign of a person who has good character qualities, even though I wouldn't necessarily identify that as a specific quality. So decide what you want, decide what you find attractive. And the importance of that is that when you do that, you actually will know that you've found what you're looking for when you find it. Now, there are some things that you're never going to be able to identify, and the reality is you probably aren't going to get everything on your list because, none of us is perfect, and we all have areas where we can grow. But I will say that for my list, when I did start considering my husband as a possibility, he met most of them. In fact, a large majority. And so that was a pretty good indicator to me that this might actually be the person that I've been waiting for. So again, use the time that you have in your teens and 20s to not necessarily go from one relationship to the next. You don't have to have relationships where you end up with broken hearts in order to figure out what you want. You can figure out what you want by spending time with people in friendships and in groups and observing people and save the effects of the broken heart. So until next time, let's get communication healthy.